Hi and welcome back to The Books Are Everywhere. So today it is time to go through my 2021 stats. So yeah, it's taken me a while to actually finish off logging the books I read at the end of 2021, and I've finally done it, and we reached a total of 183 books read, which to me is insane. That is almost 100 more than I've ever read in a year before. I think the previous year in 2020 I read 85 books-ish. So yeah, that number is insane to me, but I'm really chuffed with myself. I'm so happy with the amount I managed to read. I don't really know how I did it. I didn't change anything drastic. The only thing I really changed was listening to audiobooks, and that definitely did help. I must have added around 30 to 40 books to my overall goal, I imagine. And I don't know if that also kind of had a little bit of an effect on the other books I read, because maybe I just felt like I was in more of a reading mood because I was reading more on audio. I don't really know. But yeah, it did add a lot to my total to read on audio, but it didn't bump it up that much. So I don't really know what my secret is. I just managed to read 183 books in 2021, which is very cool. So yeah, I'm going to take you through a few stats today. I do keep a spreadsheet of all of the books that I read in the year, and that includes like things like genre and age range that it's based aimed at. And things like that, whether I bought it or borrowed it. So we're going to go through those kind of things. I'll put some little graphs on the screen for you. I hope you're a stats nerd. I really enjoy looking at my stats. I've been keeping a spreadsheet for the past, I think I'm going into my third year of keeping a spreadsheet for what I read. And I don't know, there's just something really satisfying about it, about looking at all of these kind of pie charts and graphs and seeing where my kind of totals come from and where my reading comes from and stuff like that. So anyway, I'm going to talk you through the basic Goodreads stats that Goodreads has given me at the end of the year. I do still read Goodreads to log my reading. I would like to find an alternative, but I just find it so easy to use and I've been reading it for a very long time. So although there is a lot that I don't like about it, including the fact that it's owned by Amazon, I don't buy anything through it. So it's not the worst thing in the world, and it is just like my whole history is on there and I'm so used to it at this point, but hopefully I'll move at some point. But anyway, my 2021 year in books, I read 183 books and I hit 66,660 pages, which is a lot of sixes, so take that what you will, take from that what you will. My shortest book was 64 pages, which was actually the first book I read in the year. It was a novella in the middle of the Stalking Jack the Ripper series. And then my longest book was Priory the Orange Tree, which I also read in January last year, and that was 827 pages. My average book length was 364 pages. My most popular book was The Great Gatsby, and my least popular book was Black Joy, which only 334 people also shelved on Goodreads. My average rating was 4.2 stars, which is completely inaccurate because I use half stars and then I round up for Goodreads. So I'd say it's more like 3.7. I don't really know how accurate that is, but like off the top of my head, I'm gonna say it's like late threes rather than like early fours, because I do round up from my 3.5, 4.5 stars, so there will be a lot more like 4 and 5 stars than is actually in my head. But anyway, or on my actual reviews, I do link it in my review what I actually rated it in half stars. And the highest rated on Goodreads was Heartstopper Volume 4, which is very nice. And yeah, the first book of the year that I read was Becoming the Dark Prince, which is a novella. So yeah, that's what Goodreads gives me. Let's dive into all of my other stats, which as you can see is a lot of kind of graphs and pie charts and things. And I'm going to put these on the screen for you so you have kind of a visual representation of it as well. And I'm just going to take you through all of the graphs that I logged. I use a spreadsheet that I will link down below, which I've used for the past couple of years and I absolutely love. I don't use everything on there, but I use most of it, and I'm using it again for 2022 because I do love the layout, so I'll link that down below. But anyway, let's start as the charts go across. We have reading by age range, which has missed out middle grade for some reason. Don't really know how, but yeah, I read 42 adult books, 8 new adult books, which is something I find really difficult to categorise, because there's probably a lot that I would categorise as new adult, but because new adult isn't really a common thing in bookshops and things, I don't think about things being new adult unless I actually sit down and think, well, what would I categorise this as? So that's probably a little bit inaccurate, but yeah, 8 new adult, 108 YA, so I'm still firmly in YA at the moment. Children's was 13, and then I worked out by deducting all of those from my total that my middle grade was 12, which is less than I thought actually, but it's cool. So yeah, I deducted all of those because for some reason it didn't log middle grade. I don't really know why. I'm not the most proficient person with spreadsheets. I would like to learn a bit more, but I don't really know how to fix things when they go wrong. And because I use this as like a template, it just didn't log. Oh well. But yeah, anyway, let's move on to the next one, which is books by release. And then we have rereads, which was 18, which for me is quite a lot of rereads because I don't read a lot. I don't reread a lot. However, I did read, I think, the start of some series again to carry on with the series. I think there was at least one series I did that with, but I couldn't tell you what it was now. I reread the entirety of Heartstopper, to the first 3 volumes, so that is going to be a big chunk of it. And I don't know what else I reread. I reread Jane Eyre. There's going to be some like really random ones, and I think because I read so much, obviously the amount I reread went up a little bit, but I don't really reread. I've definitely had years where I've reread nothing, so that's kind of fascinating. I read 33 arcs, which is actually more than I expected, but I guess I do read a lot of arcs even if they're like backlist and they've already been released. I read 34 new books, which I think means that they were released in 2021. And then I read 92 backlist books, which I think, yeah, means they were released 2020 or earlier, so a lot of my reading was backlist books, over half of them. And then we get into books by genre, which is fascinating. There is a lot here. This has changed a lot throughout the years, I've read more, but the bottom line is I read the most fantasy with 36.6%, so 67 books were fantasy books, which for me, I was not sure how that would play out because I've always been a little bit on the fence between fantasy and contemporary with what I prefer to read, and I feel like I have gone more towards fantasy recently, but I wasn't sure how that would actually look in my statistics. But yeah, I read mostly fantasy, and then I read 33 contemporary, so that makes up 18% of what I read. And then I read 12.6% or 23 classics, which is mainly because this set up here, which is my Wordsworth edition set, are all classics, and I managed to read them all in 2021. So that's probably why that number is so high. My goal going into the year was to read 12 classics, which was one for every month. And I was just doing so well with it and read more that I ended up just reading the whole set because I thought that was a nice thing to kind of go for. But anyway, moving around the pie chart, we then have thrillers, which is 8 thrillers. I could not even tell you what most of those were. I definitely read a few Karen M. McManus books, which I would count as thriller. I think I also read The Guest List early last year. Other than that, I couldn't really tell you what the others were, but there's 8 of them on there. And then 11 sci-fi, which makes up 6%. Also couldn't really tell you what those were. Honestly, can't even think of one that I would have counted as sci-fi. I read a lot more fantasy than I do sci-fi, but I guess there was some in there somewhere. I read 11 romance. Romance I struggle to categorise because I think a lot of them are contemporary with romance, unless the plot is like very, very focused on romance. I don't really count it as romance. So there'll be things like One Last Stop in there that I would count as like purely or more focused on romance than it is anything else. So there's 11 romances. 2 poetries, which you can barely even kind of see on the pie chart. I might have to zoom in to do this. So yeah, there's 2 poetries in there. Can't think to what they were either. 1 non-fiction, but there is more memoir, so that I do find it weird that there's like non-fiction and memoir. And then 3 memoirs, which was 1.6%. And then 3 horrors, which again was 1.6%. 8 historical fictions. I really don't read a lot of horror or historical fiction, so the fact that there's any on there at all, I feel like I've read quite diversely. And then we move on to graphic novel, which was 13, and that's 7.1%. Definitely have been reading more graphic novels in the past year or so, year or two, so it is cool to see that kind of reflected in my stats as well. And then we go on to my reading by source, so this is just where I got the book from. Mostly I bought the books, there were 112 books that I bought. I count that not just bought in 2021, but bought in any year. If I remember buying it, whether that's secondhand or new or discounted or whatever, then I bought it, so I've put it on there. And then I had 33 proofs, 4 borrowed, and 34 gifts. So there was a big chunk there that were gifts as well, and gifts and ARCs were roughly the same level. And then I had reading by format. Now this one is the one I struggle with because I sometimes listen to audiobooks partly and read hardbacks or paperbacks partly. So I'll like read a couple of chapters on audio and then pick up the physical copy. So sometimes I struggle what to categorise it as, but I tried to do it so if I read it mostly on audio, I counted it as an audio, and if I read it mostly physically, I counted it physically. So we have 36 audiobooks, 51 hardcover books, 95 paperback books, and 1 ebook. And the 1 ebook was Becoming the Dark Prince, which is the Stalking Jack the Ripper novella that I mentioned earlier. And that's the only one I read in the year, apparently, on ebook. And then we have my ratings breakdown. This is a lot more accurate because this actually counts half stars in it, so you can see my proper ratings breakdown on what I actually rated all of my books throughout the year. So we had 1 1-star, none 1.5, 3 2-stars, and 3 2.5 stars, 13 3-stars, 22 3.5 stars, 71 4-stars, which I can't believe how skyrocketed that 4-star rating is. I rated a lot of books 4 stars in 2022. And then 31 4.5 stars and 39 5 stars. I feel like 39 5 stars is a good chunk of what I read, although again there will be a lot in there that's like Heartstopper, which I rated all of them 5 stars because I do love them so much. But yeah, it definitely goes to show that I rate a lot of my books 4 stars. And I think that's probably because I do like a lot of the books I read, but I don't love them, and often I will rate something 4 stars when it hasn't blown me away, but I did enjoy it quite a lot. And I feel like that just reflects what I choose to read as well. I guess I know what I like, so I'm likely to enjoy a lot of the books I actually pick up. And then we have my ARCs read versus my ARCs still on my TBR. I definitely have more that I hadn't added to this, so this isn't 100% accurate, but I read 14 proofs on my list and I still have 5 to read. So I think that's accurate in terms of what I've logged so far, but there is definitely going to be some on there that I haven't added to the list. And then the last thing I wanted to talk about is how I heard about my reads, which I find really interesting, although sometimes I find it hard to pinpoint where I actually found a book, especially if it's been on my shelves for a long time. But we've got 54 books, so 29.5% of books were author. So I think that basically just means I read them because I already read books by the author, or already liked books by the author, and then I've just put it in as author. We have 25 or 13.7% browsing, so I just found them in shops, which is probably more historical than it is now, because I think I hear a lot more about books now on social media or through friends and things. And then 25, so equally to browsing, 25, 13.7% were from social media, which I think I've also included like BookTube. And then 23 or 12.6% were from the publishers. So this is books that I wouldn't have necessarily picked up myself unless they were offered to me by the publisher or they were sent to me by the publisher unsolicited, but then I ended up like picking them up and adding them to my TBR. And then 55 books, so the most percentage, 30.1%, was recommended to me by a friend, which I think is really nice. I really like how many books I've read in 2021 that were actually recommended to me. I do often pick up books because they were recommended to me, and even if like I'm picking up a book and I know a friend recommended it or I know a friend really liked it, sometimes I'll add it as a friend recommendation as well. So yeah, I'm really happy with that. I think that's a really nice statistic to have a lot of friends recommending me books. And then out of interest, I won't tell you how much I spent on books throughout the year, although that is something I did keep track of, which is a very, very daunting amount and something I probably need to work on. However, and I don't know if this is 100% accurate, it might be a couple of books out because of things I read right at the end of the year. I bought or were given 238 books in 2021, which for me is a massive amount considering it's probably around half of the books I own. Obviously there was some stuff that I did get rid of as well, so it has balanced out in a way, but I definitely am entering 2022 with a lot less room on my shelves and in my room in general because of the amount of books that I have in it. But I did read 132 of those books. So I read over half of what I bought in 2021, which is kind of where I wanted to be throughout the year when I was watching this statistic go up and down. I wanted to be reading more than half of what I was buying. So yeah, I think that's a really cool statistic. I'm glad I kept track of what I spent, although that isn't entirely accurate as well. If I'd like pre-ordered a box set or like a special edition late in the year before, I didn't add that amount and things like that. But very interesting to keep track of that, although it's very, very daunting. So yeah, that brings me to the end of my 2021 statistics. I thought at the end of this video I'd just take you through a few goals I have for the year. I don't really set hard and fast resolutions for myself. It's just something I've never really done in terms of New Year's resolutions or reading resolutions. I'm much more likely to set a reading resolution than I am a life resolution. But yeah, normally I just have like loose things in my head that I want to achieve in the next year, so I thought I'd just quickly take you through them in the end of this video rather than create an entire another video about it because I will just end up rambling on about stuff. But yeah, I thought I'd just take you through the few things I have in my head that I want to hit in 2022. So the first one being I want to read 150 books. Now this is something I would never have set myself before, and last year I was umming and ahhing about whether to set myself 100 as a goal for 2021, but because I have gone so far above and beyond that, I feel like 150 is still a good target for me to put in. Right now it feels quite achievable, but it also feels like it could be a bit of a challenge because I don't know what life is going to throw at me in 2022, so we will kind of see where that goes. But I thought 150 was a pretty good goal considering I read 183 in 2021. So yeah, that's where I decided to put my Goodreads goal this year. Other goals I kind of have is I want to hopefully start a few YouTube projects in terms of like unhauling books, getting through series, doing little challenges for myself. I would like to read some backlist series I have that I started and didn't finish, and I will do another video telling you about those books that I want to read. I would also like to try and clear my shelves of proofs that I have or books that I have historically that I haven't read yet and I feel like I will get rid of once I've read them. There is a few books like that I read, that I bought a long time ago, and they don't really interest me now, but I don't want to get rid of them without reading them because they could be amazing. But I also feel like I'll probably get rid of them after I read them. So I might do a kind of like project where I try and do that. I feel like there'll also be some books that I want to reread before deciding whether to keep them or not, because I may have loved them 5-6 years ago but they're not for me anymore and I don't really want to keep them. But that's a bigger project and I don't know when I'm going to do that because I want to do that when I have less on my TBR to tackle. And talking about my TBR, the other thing I'd like to do is get my physical TBR back down to under 100. So I started 2021 with 108 physical books on my TBR, and my goal last year was to get below that amount for entering 2022, and I was doing really well with that. I think the lowest I got to was in the 80s, and then the last part of the year hit where a lot of books were released and it was my birthday and things, and my TBR went back up to 126. I have actually got that down in the past couple of weeks from about 10 books more than that. So I'm doing okay, but I want to keep on that trajectory, stop buying so many books and start reading the ones already on my shelves and get that down below 100 by the end of the year as well. I feel like for me personally, and this is something me and my friend Courtney talk about a lot, is physical TBRs for us, if they get below kind of like 75, we feel like we don't actually have that much to read in terms of like choice, because a lot of the books on our TBRs might be series that we've got and haven't yet finished, in terms of like all of the books haven't come out, so we don't necessarily want to start those series until they're complete. So they're kind of like books that we can't necessarily read because the series aren't finished. And then if you split it up into like standalones and complete series and incomplete series, actually your physical TBR doesn't look so daunting, and that is something that we have found talking about this in the past kind of year or so. So I feel like I would like to aim to be around 80, but that is, I don't know if that'll happen. So for now, I'd like to get that below 100 in the next couple of months, maybe in the first half of the year or something, and then try and kind of keep it under control a bit more than I have been in the last part of 2021. But yeah, anyway, I think that's all of the goals that I have really for 2022. I would like to get my book buying a little bit more under control and not spend so much money on books in 2021. It was a big amount at the end of the year, and although I didn't feel it necessarily because it was in such little chunks, that would have been a nice amount to be able to save as well, or like half of that or whatever. So maybe it'd be nice to get my book buying under control as well. So yeah, those are a few goals I have for 2022. If you have any goals for 2022, let me know. I do find it really interesting to set little goals for myself, but then I don't want to put too much pressure on myself to actually stick to them because reading is fun. So yeah, I'm gonna leave it there. I hope you've enjoyed looking at the statistics in this video, hearing about me ramble on about my 2022 goals, and I will see you next time in another video. Bye!